Well, we recently finished the story of Queen Leela, who travelled through the universe with the goddess Saraswati. Not only did she travel through this universe, but she travelled through other universes. And we're told she travelled through the universe in her ethereal body. And this was described as the yogi's real body. And I took this to mean what we in the West traditionally refer to as astral projection. And I'm quite aware of how talking about astral projection might affect some people. My own training's scientific, and if somebody starts talking about astral projection, it's a wee bit iffy. And if somebody is talking about astral projection and reality, then what they're saying about reality is going to be undermined somewhat by their talk about astral projection. It's quite clear that astral projection is not a scientific phenomenon, although those that practice astral projection might say otherwise. It is very simply established whether it's a scientific phenomenon or not. In fact, there was an exercise in a book on astral projection, which the exercise involved leaving your body, going into the room next door and describing what was happening, and then coming back to your body and reporting what happened. And this would be a very simple experiment to do, very easily verified. And it's the whole point about a scientific experiment is that it's repeatable, and people that have got this supposed facility for leaving their bodies should be able to do this quite easily. It should be easily verifiable. But as far as I know, it's not been verified, and astral projection is not regarded as a scientific phenomenon. If there's any evidence to the contrary, I'd quite like to know. But it seems to me that if astral projection was a verifiable scientific phenomenon, then we'd know about it. It'd be generally known. So let's be quite clear about that. It isn't a scientific phenomenon. It's not. I do not think it's possible to leave your body and go to somewhere in this common reality that we all share, what I call the consensual reality, and report back on events that are happening in that reality. On the other hand, I've no doubt that the experience is very real. And I don't think it's that much difference from what most of us experience on a daily basis. I mentioned I have a scientific background. One of the subjects I studied was computer science. And what struck me with computer science, I mean, computing is part of all our lives now. Computers are a part of all our lives. Computers are very definite objects. But when I was studying computing science, I was quite struck about how abstract it is. Here we've got something very practical, very concrete, very real, and yet it's also incredibly abstract. I also studied physics, and physics is about the natural world. It's studying the natural world. It's trying to understand the reality of the natural world. And yet the more physicists study the reality of the natural world, the more abstract it becomes. The more you start looking into subatomic particles, the more abstract it becomes, and the more you look out into space and you consider things like the speed of light and some of these remarkable stellar objects like black holes and so on. Well, the things that although these things are supposed to be very real, there's something very abstract about it. And even the very notion of the Big Bang, that somehow at this point the universe began and before that there was neither time nor space. It does get very abstract, doesn't it? This so-called reality that we live in is very, very abstract. But I said we enter into something similar to astral projection every day, several times each day. We spend about a third of our lives in sleep. We spend a good proportion of that in dreams. Are dreams real? Do they have their own materiality? They're certainly emotionally real. If you think the emotions are real, which they must be, because that's what guides us most of the time, then I would think dreams are real. Yeah, that brings us to the question of what is real. Normally we regard something as real if we can experience it through the senses, if we can see it, if we can touch it, if we can feel it, if we can smell it, taste it, hear it. We tend to say something is real. But what about emotions? We like to think of ourselves as rational and realistic. That we're logical. And yet most of us are driven by our emotions, by our emotional needs, by insecurities. Are these insecurities rational? Are our emotional needs rational? Perhaps sometimes yes, but perhaps a lot of the times no. Perhaps we spend a lot of time daydreaming. If you commute to work, you're usually caught up in your thoughts. People zone out, don't they? You might be in a meeting, but your thoughts are somewhere else and you're completely oblivious to what's going on. So what's happening there? Where's your attention? If you're watching television or you're at the cinema looking at a screen, what's happened to your rationality then? What's happened to your realism then? You're getting caught up in images. And what are these images that you're getting caught up on? I said they're on a screen. But are they on a screen? What's on that screen? You've got little patterns of light. You might be watching the movie on a DVD. Well, what's on a DVD? I said, well, you think the movie's on the DVD, but it's not. What's on the DVD is just a lot of little holes. A lot of little holes which are an encoded pattern of ones and zeros. This movie that you're watching, that you're getting emotionally involved in some way or another, is nothing but a pattern of ones and zeros. That's what you're getting emotionally caught up in. That's the reality of it. That's the reality of what a DVD is. It's a plastic disc with little holes on it, patterns of holes which represents the patterns of ones and the zeros. It's curious, isn't it, that we're living in this so-called digital age, and we're being asked, for example, to preserve our photographs by digitizing them, by scanning them. And what that means is putting them into a pattern of ones and zeros, keeping them on a plastic disc or on our hard drive or somebody else's hard drive. Somehow that is more real now than actually having them printed out on some photographic paper